Hi everyone, and welcome to Mince Pie Baking with me, Michelle Wilding from Boozy Bakers. I will wait for everyone to just click on, anyone that's maybe making a cup of tea quickly. You are welcome to bake along, watch now and bake later, whichever you prefer. But this is very interactive, so please do comment, shout out, say hello, ask me any questions you like. Tell me what you're doing today. This is the first mince pies I've baked for Christmas, so I'm quite excited because I do like a mince pie. But I'm going to look out for your comments as well. So do shout out and tell me where you're from as well. It's always interesting to see where everyone is. And if you have snow, you get brownie points. So whilst we wait, I'll just do a few little bits and I'll repeat it for anyone who might join us. So your oven temperature, if you want to preheat it now, you will need a temperature of 200 degrees Celsius, 180 for fan, gas mark 6. So if you get your oven ready to go, and we can make some nice mince pies. And we'll go through some options as well, whether you have the right equipment or you're doing this without anything. I can give you lots of hints and tips from using a wine bottle as a rolling pin to glasses as cutters. So don't worry if you don't have everything, we can make do. So we'll give it a couple more minutes and then let's get cracking with the baking. I must admit, I have used just a jar of mincemeat today. You can make your own, but for this, we want to keep it nice and easy. It's more about the enjoyment of doing something Christmassy, the smells of Christmas, and then eating it, of course. So, right then. Okay, I will start off. This is going to make 12 mince pies. Now, I did say in the ingredients and equipment list, you can use a shallow tin or a deep tin. So depending on what you use, you might find that you end up with a few more or a few less. Because obviously deeper, you're going to use more of the pastry. So the first thing I'm going to suggest you do is grease your tin. So it's nice and ready. So that's my deep one. I use these when I make my muffin cakes, things like that. And then my shallow one, I actually use it when I make Jaffa cakes. And I've had to rescue these from my husband who uses it to do Yorkshire puddings in, but it's not a great idea to share that with the Yorkshire pudding tin. So yeah, nice shallow one. So decide, or you could do half and half. I don't mind. I think I'm going to do some shallow ones today. And all you need to do is get a pastry brush and a bit of butter or margarine for this bit, and just grease each of the holes of the tin, just lightly, not too thick. You just want to coat it in the grease so that when they're baked, they don't get stuck. And we can release them. So just go around. If you don't have a pastry brush, you can use just a bit of kitchen towel and just add a bit of the kitchen towel to your butter and just wipe that around the tins. But it doesn't need to be excessive, just enough so it doesn't stick. Might even be an idea to go around just the very outside, just in case your pastry goes over. So there we go. Dip that in a bit more. You have to see, you have to make a comment of how many you actually make with this recipe. It'll depend how thick your pastry is as well. Right, there we go. That is all done. If you are baking along with me, if I go too fast on something, feel free just to comment and say, wait, or didn't catch that, and I'll happily go over everything again. So that's my greased tin. So it's all ready to go when we've got our pastry. Right. I've chosen nice glass bowls so you can see my mixture quite nicely. I roll up my sleeves. There we go. Right. To make the pastry, I've chosen what I think is quite a simple recipe, and it's a sweetened dough. It's a short crust pastry. So I've got 200 grams of plain flour. So I'm going to tip that into my larger bowl. I always think, particularly if you're baking with kids, go for larger bowls because you've got less chance of it all going everywhere, and there's more room to just mess about, really. So to your 200 grams of plain flour, I'm going to add 40 grams of icing sugar, just to sweeten your dough. If you don't have icing sugar, you can use castor. I like using a nice powdered sugar. Right. There we go. Goes in there. And I'm just going to give that a little bit of a mix. And combine that together. You don't need to sieve this because we're not treating it's not going to rise. We don't have any expectations of it to do anything in the way of rising. So you don't need to sieve it unless it happens to be really clumpy. You can just leave it as it is. So that was 200 grams of plain flour and 40 grams of icing sugar. Right, don't need them. I'm not using margarine. I'm using butter, and I'm using chilled butter because pastry you want to keep it as cold as possible, really. So using chilled butter is the way to go. It's also firmer. So if you're not going to use butter and you want to use a margarine, I would stick to the blocks, not the spreads, because they just don't have the same firmness. So I've got in here 100 grams of chilled butter, and I've cut it into little squares just to help me out a bit. Because if I put in, that's my oven saying it's such a temperature. If I put in a big wedge of 100 grams, I've got to use my fingers to rub it all together next, and I'm just giving myself a bigger job. Whereas if you cut it up into pieces, it's just that little bit easier. Right. There we go. So I've got my 100 grams of chilled butter in with my flour and the icing sugar. Now you can get some nifty like tools to do this job for you. You can also use a food processor if you want. They don't work so well on the lives because it's very noisy. So I'm just going to use my fingers and just rub that together. I actually find this quite therapeutic as well. I quite like doing quite tactile baking. So all you need to do is just push the flour and the butter together and just kind of rub it together until it resembles breadcrumbs. So if you've made an apple crumble, it's not dissimilar to that, really. So it does take a moment, but it's worth it. Now I need to know if anyone in the country has snow today, because we never do. And when I've done these lives and other lives around the country, when I hear people have got snow, I get very jealous. But I do like to hear it exists because here in Hampshire we don't have so much, especially in the south. So if you've got snow, please do tell me. Right. I've got my Christmas jumper on today, though. Has anyone else been wearing Christmas jumpers yet? And so it does take a moment. I do, if you're not sitting down doing a workshop, it is actually easier to do this standing up because you're, rather than having your arms out too high, you've got a better angle like this. But then I cut my head off. If I maybe slouch a bit for a second. The problem being 6 foot tall is you don't quite fit on the camera. Right, so I'm getting there. It's just got some bigger clumps. It doesn't matter if some of it's a little bit more clumpy than others, but overall, you do want to try and get it to be a bit more breadcrumb-like. So bear with it, and it will get there. So we've been doing lots of Christmas fairs recently, and we've done some really nice ones. We did one at, I don't know if you know Milestones Museum. It's like in a hangar, and it's all Victorian kind of little village. It's lovely. So hopefully you'll all got a little bit of time at least to enjoy some festivities in the coming weeks. I think it was quite a big weekend for Christmas fairs actually, the one just gone. There we go, I'm getting there. So I'm just giving it a bit more of a rub, and you can see the texture's looking a little more like little bits now. I'm just going to get rid of anything massively big, but I think we're about there. I'll bring this up to camera so you can see. So as a recap, that is 100 grams of chilled butter with 200 grams of plain flour and 40 grams of icing sugar. There we go. Let me just wipe my hands for a minute. Been prepared today with my damp cloth, just so I don't get it all over the laptop. There we go. So you can see the texture there. It's quite crumbly, and that's what we want. Okay. And then we're going to add an egg. So it's just a medium egg. I don't get too hung up about the size of eggs, if I'm honest. Medium, if it's a bit small, I think typically, if you want to be really accurate about it, 60 grams is about a medium egg. So if you find that you've got a particularly tiny egg, you can always add a splash of water, but just go with the egg for now and let's see the texture, and we'll work it out from there. We can always add a bit more flour or a bit of water. So get your egg and add it to your ingredients. Now, if you crack an egg, I've just used the side of the bowl. You can use a worktop or a spoon or something. If you find that a piece of shell goes into the bowl, a really good tip, whatever you're making, if you get eggshell into the bowl, use a piece of your shell to fish the bit that slipped in out, because it's a bit like magnetic to each other. They kind of stick together quite nicely, rather than trying to fish it out with your fingers, because that never goes as well as you think. Right, I'm going to use a knife just to combine this. You can use a spoon. I just find it doesn't stick so much to a knife, and you can easily just bring it out, just take the mixture off on the side of the bowl. So you want to just stir that together to make a dough. Now, this is short crust pastry. It might look a bit crumbly at first. Bear with it and just give it a really good stir. We want it to just come together. And we want to try not to touch it too much. I know we've rubbed it all in, but overall, when a pastry's come together, you want to try and keep it cool, and you don't want to overwork it. You get a nice short crust pastry that way. So it's already starting to clump together. If I show you, you've got bigger pieces in there. So I'm just going to keep working with it. Try not to be too noisy with my glass bowl. It's getting there. Just try and capture all the bits that are in the bottom. That might be a little bit floury. If I show you again, if you can see, it's coming together a bit more. There we go. I do think this is one of those classic recipes that you, any age you can make. I think my kids are now 11 and 13, and they still like making things like this. It's not too labour intensive, and I think that's what's good about it. I'm going to stand up again just to get that arm angle right. There we go. Now, if you want to add extra ingredients to these, if you want to add any spice, you can add a pinch of, say, cinnamon or nutmeg or ginger or a mixed spice, and you can put that in with the flour if you want to jazz up your dough. You can see I've changed the way I'm holding this, so I'm a little bit more kind of clenched fist, because it is actually coming together really nicely now. I think a couple more stirs and I might get my hand in there just to bring it into a ball, if it doesn't do it for me. You can already see, can't you, through the glass, that it's coming together very nicely, like that. So I'm just going to scrape down that knife. As I said, much cleaner than using my spoon. And then you should be able just to push all that into a dough. Now, I don't want to handle it too much, but you can see from that it's not sticky, but it has come together. So that's what you want from your pastry. If you find that you really can't bring it together, then you can add a teaspoon of cold water at a time, and just make sure that don't overdo it. Just bit by bit bring it together, mix it, make sure. I think a teaspoon really should do it, but if you need a bit more, then obviously use what you need. In the same way, if you find that it's sticky and it's sticking to your hands, just add a teaspoon of flour and just bring it together so that you should be able to hold it. And you might feel a bit greasy on your hands, but it's not sticking to your hands. Right. So there's a different ways. Well, it's still rolling out. We're going to roll out the pastry now. You can either flour your surface, or if you don't like mess, you could use parchment paper and place it down. Put the dough onto the parchment paper and then put another piece on top. So you've kind of sandwiched the dough between two pieces of parchment paper and roll on the top of that. I don't mind getting messy today, so I'm just going to angle this on the table more. There we go. There is me, because you want to see the table more than you want to see me right now. So I'm just going to sprinkle just a little bit of flour. I don't want too heavy because we don't want the pastry to pick up all of, you don't want the dryness. I've got all my cutters there ready to use, so I'll go through those in a minute. There. Bit of flour on my hands, but again, not too much. And then I've just got a rolling pin and I'm going to roll this out so it's a few millimeters thick, so no more than a pound in thickness. The thicker your pastry, it might just need a couple more minutes. But if you really like your pastry more than you like your mincemeat, maybe that's what you want to do. But a nice pastry, about a pound in thickness. And if you're worried about it sticking, just make sure you move your pastry, put a bit more flour underneath, and then set it down again. We'll keep going. Put some flour on your rolling pin if you feel it's sticking to that. Again, just move it because I can feel it sticking ever so slightly. A good sign that it's sticking as well is if it's not moving. If you can't get it to really move and thin out and spread out, it might be because you are stuck underneath. So I'm just going to use a little bit extra. Might have a bit of like a blob of butter that's kind of pinning it down. And just, whoop. If it breaks, just pinch it back together. Now you can, if you wanted to, if you don't have time or you just want to get a bit ahead of yourself, you can make the pastry and chill it in the fridge. Wrap it in some cling film and chill it. And you can use it later in the day or the next day and it will be fine. If you leave it a long time, you might just need to let it thaw out a bit before you try and roll it. But that is good depth. But yes, you can do that. So I'm just going to move some bowls because we're going to need our tray back. Here we go. Now, you want to choose a cutter that will fit in and around up the sides of your muffin tray. So if it's shallow, you might get away with like an 8-inch round cutter. And if you're a deep like muffin tin, then you might want something more like 10 centimeters. If, I'm just going to move this up again so you can see me a bit better. If you don't have a cutter, you could try using like a mug or a glass. Glass is probably better because it's thinner, upside down, and make that. Or just get like a walnut sized piece of pastry and press it into each of the muffin holes there, and just work it in. It'll be a bit more rustic, but it'll still taste as good. So I'm going to use my circular one. You can also, if you want something a bit prettier, I don't know if you can see that, oh, that way, you can also use a fluted cutter. I've got just my simple round one. I'm going to cut it out. There we go. I'll show you. It's really not that thick. I could even get away with doing thinner than that. And then you want to lay it in your tray. I'll try and do this without letting it flop onto the computer, but lay it in your tray and just push down. Use your thumb. If you've got nails, you could always use a knuckle if you've got long nails. But and just bring it around the tray. Try and get into the edges. If you've, like me, I've gone a bit further up here and a bit lower there, just use your finger just to move it around. It's nice and pliable pastry. So just move it around. Try and get rid of any air pockets. It doesn't bubble. That's it. And we're going to do that for all of the trays. You've got a bit more work. Actually, this is a bit thick. You've got a bit more work if you've got the deep pan because you've got further to go up the sides. But same process applies. Just work away. Try and, well, if you're doing this with me, hopefully you're not speeding ahead. I'll keep going. All these extra pieces, we're going to make some lids, so don't worry about the extra pieces. If you're worried about using too much, the one thing you could do is make them bit by bit. So we could do like 3 or 4 and then top them, make sure we've got the lids to go with them, and then you're not going to have an uneven amount. If you want to do it like that, if you're not sure about how much you're using, what I would say is for the top, either use a cutter. You might want a bit smaller to go over the top. That goes, it's the same size as your the top of your muffin hole here, and it will stick to the top completely. So that's a sealed pie. Or you can get a little bit arty. You could use something like a star cutter, like that. To sit on the top. I quite like that. I quite like seeing a bit of mincemeat sticking out. Or I've got, I'm not very good with my angles. There we go. I've got a little Christmas tree. I'm trying to angle that so you can see it. Little Christmas tree you could put on top. Or a little gingerbread man. Whatever you would like, use. I'm going to go for some stars. So I'm going to just make sure I've got the right amount of stars for the right amount of bases. So I'm not left with some being without. We can always roll this up and make some more. So I've got my 3. So we'll go back to doing the circles. And so I think I've got slightly thicker pastry, but I'm all right with that because I'm thinning it out ever so slightly for my cases, but you can always roll it a bit thinner if you need to. So I'm kind of pushing it a bit and making it a bit thinner as I set it into the tray. There we go. Do another one. And you just keep going. I like it. We need a bit of Christmas music, don't we? There we go. Get really adventurous. I don't know. You could do like a chocolate version, or you could zest some chocolate version. Sounds rubbish actually with mincemeat. But if you don't like mincemeat, you could go for a different filling. You could fill them with jam or curd and make tarts instead with this. But yeah, you could grate some zest into your mince pie pastry if you wanted to. If you wanted to add, or is it cardamom, something like that? Be a bit inventive. Bit of hazelnut, crushed ground hazelnut into it or something. Make some fancier mince pies. Right, so I've got another 3, so I'm going to do 3 more stars. I'm not seeing any comments. So if you are commenting, then I do apologise that I'm not responding to you. But equally, if you're happy baking or just watching along, that is no problem. Sometimes when you're baking and you've got your hands dirty as well, it's hard to do both. There we go. So that's another 3 stars. Lots of offcuts. So all that can be balled up again to make some more. And if you've made your 12 and you find that you've got a bit of extra, or you don't want 12 for now, you want some for another time, you can save your pastry. Or freeze it as well. There we go. Another one. I think we might get another one out of that. There we go, getting a dab hand at this now. Yeah, I think we can squeeze another one out of that. So place that in. So if you miss the very start and you are baking along, 180 for fan, 200 for conventional, and gas mark 6 if you want to get your oven preheated. Right, I might as well use that pastry to make a star because it's sitting there nicely. And then just ball that up. You should still have a nice dough. There we go. I'm trying not to touch it too much. So if I've got like creases in it, I'll show you what I mean. You see those creases? Try not to worry about those too much because as you roll it out, as long as you just keep the edges a little bit smoother and just bring it in, they will eventually, look, they're disappearing in the middle. So it just means I'm not touching the dough too much and not overworking it. And that original flour I had on, I might use a bit more. It's not as sticky now, so I don't need too much, just a little dusting. There we go. A bit more. May have made 11 rather than 12, but we'll see. Yeah, it's a bit thicker again. Might just roll that out a bit more. There we go. Just recut it. Save a bit of pastry, and then I'm not eating too much pastry either. There we go. 1, 2. Well, I don't know. I think I might have my full tray here. Another one, and the last circle, and then I've just got some stars to make. That's really thick actually. I think we need to just roll that out a bit more. It's a nice thing though, is that it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. And if you think, you know what, I need to re-roll it, it's not a problem. So let's put that one in. Just press it up the sides a bit. There we go. And then I just, can I make a star there? Yes. It's like pattern cutting, isn't it, for fabric? So I've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I need a few more stars. So I'll do that. I'm going to have to post some pictures to Virtual Village Hall of your finished bakes. And just put your pictures underneath the comments so we can all have a look. Tell us how they taste as well. So 1 star, 2, 3. So actually, I haven't got a great deal of pastry left there. Might have had enough to do 1 more, but not that much pastry left. So you'll have your tray filled with your bases, and you've got your tops ready to go. So now we're going to add, I'm just going to just give my hands a little wipe. We're going to add some mincemeat. Now I've just gone for a Sainsbury's. Actually, I've made them too wet now to handle getting this open. Oh no. There we go. So I've just gone for a Sainsbury's mincemeat. If you want to, again, jazz up your mince pies, you could add some orange zest or some grated apple to your mincemeat, or a tablespoon of brandy to stick with my Boozy Baker image. So yeah, if you want to add your own take to the mincemeat, just buy some if needs be, and just jazz it up a bit. So you want to fill these. So I've just got my latte spoon because it's quite deep for jars, but that's just a heaped teaspoon, and that's filled it. So that's what you want. You don't want to go any higher than your pastry. What you might find is when you bake them, obviously it's sugary mix. Actually, that needs a bit more, that one. It's a sugary mix, and if it bubbles and it goes over slightly and presses onto your tin, that might stop your mince pie coming out the tin. So just be aware of that, and just gently remove the mincemeat mix from the muffin tin, and your pie should come away. I'm just dropping it now. There we go. Back in you go. Well, and just fill these. Smells like Christmas. Get these all done. And of course, the oven is ready for these to go straight in. And then I'm going to have to play some Christmas tunes, I think, before I eat these. What does everyone do? Do you eat? Do you have a cup of tea with your mince pie? Is it more of a dessert for you? Do you add a bit of cream or brandy cream? It doesn't last that long for me. It just goes straight in, whole probably. Getting there. So if you're not a big fan of mincemeat, you could make these into jam tarts instead. It's a really good sweet crust pastry recipe for a lot of things. You've got your Bakewell tarts. You could use it for that. There we go. One more. There. And then all you need to do is get your tops and place them on top. Now, if you went for a full circle, I should have made one actually, shouldn't I? Bear with me. Let's make it one just so I can show you. It's a good job I've got that extra bit of pastry, really. Hang on. I'll get there. It's a bit sticky. There we go. This might be a bit big. Actually, that's smaller, isn't? That's smaller. A little bit smaller at least. If you're doing whole ones, you want them to go right over, you see, completely sealed, and then press that. I'll do this one. Just press it in. You don't need milk or egg to press it together. It's sticky enough just to stick together. But what I'd advise with that is just get a knife and just give it a prod in the middle, or a couple of prods. I think a sharp knife would be better than a table knife, but just put a couple, just so that the steam can escape from those. As I said, if you're doing shapes on top, you don't need that so much. So I'm just going to add these to the top. And then we'll add these to the oven. I'll show you when I've getting there, nearly done. Now, if you want to, you can sprinkle these with a little bit of caster sugar or brown sugar now. If you want them to look glazed, you could put a little bit of beaten egg over the top. I'm not going to bother. I'm going to leave them like this because I would prefer to sprinkle a bit of icing sugar over mine when they're baked. I think that looks really pretty. So any glaze, it will be an egg wasted really, because you won't see the pretty glaze on top. So that's what I've done. So I've got my one with the full top to it, and the rest have got little stars, and I just think they're really pretty like that. but they are all ready to go into the oven. So you want to place those in for 20 minutes. So let's get the timer on that. There we go. So it's in for 20 minutes. Now, if you've done deeper, I don't think it will need longer particularly. They are small. They're all small. So I just don't want to put my hands. I know I will. I'm going to put my whole arm in the flour. So there we go. So yeah, put them in for 20 minutes. I'll repeat the times of the oven again. It's 200 for conventional, 180 for fan, or gas mark 6. Leave them in there for 20 minutes. You should be able to smell them for a start. When you open it up, the pastry should look golden brown. If it doesn't look quite cooked, then just pop them in for a few more minutes and have another look. But you should be looking for some golden brown to the tops of them. And then put them out either onto the top of your hob or on a cooling rack and leave them to cool inside the muffin tin. If you try and take them out too early, the pastry wouldn't have cooled and it'll be soft, so they'll probably likely crumble on you. So leave them to cool. I mean, if you want them warm, that's fine, but you don't want them really hot. You want that pastry to just get a bit harder. And then you should be able to gently move them out of the tray. Either use the side of just a table knife, or what I quite like to do is a spoon, and just gently coax it if it needs it out of the tin. And then, as I said, if you want to either dust them with icing sugar afterwards, you can, or just eat them as they are, serve them with cream or just on their own. But they are my simple mince pies that I hope you enjoy. As I said, if you want to liven them up with your own take, then you can add things to the pastry, like the spices or the zest or nuts. And the same with the mincemeat. Grated apple, zest of an orange, a bit of brandy or a bit of Cointreau, or a bit Caribbean, put a bit of rum in there, and make it your own. And use your own toppings. So if you want to use a cutter or a circle, whatever you want. But that's it, guys. You've made mince pies. So do share your photos below in the comments, and join Virtual Village Hall again for some more workshops. We're back on the 20th of December for Yule logs. So we've made it a bit closer to Christmas so you can enjoy it for the big day. So hopefully we will see you then. Thanks ever so much. Bye.